What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of the Struggle to Strength podcast, your source for real-life application on how to turn your struggles into strengths in all things mind, muscle, and money. I am your host, Josh Levine. I'm joined here by my longtime friend and my co-host, Travis Hatch. And today, we are here to talk to you about a real mental health epidemic that we have in the world today. If you guys have been listening, we recently had a chance to speak with Dr. Sandeep Nayak, a leading researcher at Johns Hopkins Center for Psychedelic and Consciousness Research. If you haven't listened to that episode, I highly recommend scroll back a few and check it out. But this really made us curious to learn about other psychedelic therapies and what they are and how they work. So ketamine therapy is quickly growing as a quickly growing industry. It's changing the game by combating the mental health problems that so many face in an alternative way. So if you or someone you know has ever struggled with mental health, I think most people would say yes, whether it's anxiety, depression, PTSD, OCD, addiction, or otherwise. There is a real epidemic in the world today, and it's getting worse over time. And we need to do something about it. So in this episode, we speak with Remi Drozd, who's an ER doctor. He's a kite surfer. He's a savage mountain bike rider. He's a friend of my dad's. That's actually how we got connected. My dad is a absolute savage mountain bike rider, and he hooked me up with Raymie. But he's also a psychedelic medicine expert whose purpose is to provide truly actionable and sustainable solutions to positively impact the mental health crisis through the use of psychedelic assisted therapy. And today, we're going to be learning about the power of ketamine. So stay tuned, because it was a fascinating episode, and it aligns really well with what I believe in to avoid Band-Aid solutions and actually address root causes to create truly lasting, sustainable change. So you're going to love it. Stay tuned. But before we get into it, we ask that, as always, if you love this episode, please give us 5 stars on Apple or a follow on Spotify. Scroll to the bottom of your page, tap that 5 stars, leave a review. We would really appreciate it. Share us on your socials. You can find me at Josh Levine Fitness, Travis at Travis Hawks Media. Links are in the show notes. And that's it. So buckle up, because this is a fascinating episode. Get ready to dive deep into your subconscious mind as we welcome Remi Drozd. So we started kind of talking to a lot of people about mental health awareness and different, more sustainable and alternative practices. And so I'm really glad that we have the opportunity to talk to you. So I would love to, have you introduce yourself, and kind of like you sent us in your bio, just tell us a little bit about who you are, where you come from, and how you got to where you are now with ketamine assisted therapy. I think would be a great way to kick things off.
Great. So, my name is Remi Drozd. I'm a ER physician by training, board certified, and worked in a community hospital for 8 years. But I had a few other interests. I became a fellow in wilderness medicine. I would take sabbaticals regularly, one of which I went to Nepal, and I worked at a high altitude aid post. Spent some time in South America. I ended up helping run a position up Aconcagua. And but more recently, I started to explore more active coping mechanisms. All my patients are in this passive coping mechanism. Doc, what do I need? And take this, call in the morning kind of vibe. And I did training, a short course with Hopkins, and then I recently moved to California and did a longer experiential training with a group in the psychedelic healing arts, and it's really psychedelic assisted psychotherapy that I've just recently kind of entered and see a huge potential in.
I love that, and I completely agree, and I've expressed the work that I've been doing with psychedelic assisted therapy. Granted, it is not doctor supervised, but I've talked to my parents about it. They believe in it. They've seen the growth. I have nothing but good things to say about it. And so I'm curious. You started off in traditional medicine. Mm-hmm. What made you want to transition into psychedelic therapy?
Part of it is actually what I just was saying. There's Western medicine has a beautiful strategy of taking care of a lot of things. I worked at a really great cardiac hospital where someone came in with chest pain and they're having a heart attack, an infarction, plaque is blocking the vessel, and we can get in there and unblock that vessel. Man, there's no better place to be than that hospital that minute. And a fracture, an infectious process, we fix it. But that's like 30 or 40% of what we do. And I realized a lot of people were there for something that had nothing to do with what their complaint was. They didn't quite know what was wrong, but they were suffering. And I started identifying that people needed to have more awareness about what it is that perhaps brought them there. What is the root cause behind why you have these various pains? And I saw so much, drug addiction. It's strange. This country, North America, and specifically, but this world is such a sick world. We have, if you look at the models like from the 50s to today, 1 in 500 people were before. Now it's like 1 out of 70. And before, some people are on medicines. Now, like, honestly, 1 out of 6 adults are on some kind of psychoactive agent. And so we're the most disabled and most medicated country, but we're working so hard to get better, but we're not getting better. So something's wrong, something's not working. So my interest was in finding a more active coping mechanism. So with psychedelics, it's kind of like it's more of a active model like physical therapy. Rather than just taking a medicine and getting better, we stop, we try to really create an intentionality, figure out what is wrong, what's the narrative that really is serving you or not serving you, and then trying to see if we could disrupt that and look at your life, and rather than medicating it, rather than adapting these really maladaptive strategies to get through life, come up with a way that will serve you and everyone in your community and help you get better.
I love that. And I couldn't agree with you more. I think that a lot of times, especially in the Western world, the process is along the lines of here's what's broken, here's how we fix it. Yeah. And it's very black and white. And the brain is, we don't know that much about it. We had a gentleman named Toby Pasman on here who does like neurostimulation, and he's an expert on the brain. And we know more about outer space and like the ocean than we do the brain, really. It's incredibly complex. And so I agree. I think that in our Western world, this is broken, this is how we fix it is it's too much of a Band-Aid solution. Take this to offset this chemical imbalance instead of, and not to say that the chemical imbalance doesn't exist, but like work through, understand what your thought processes are and why it's happening. Same thing if you wanted to lose weight. Don't just take a pill and do some detox diet with a skinny fit tea or whatever it is. Like, learn what habits and routines you can change to help you get to your end goal. So now our ability to like combine psychedelics and things that help us think productively with therapy seems to be this new wave that's been incredibly helpful. And I know that, we have psilocybin therapy, we have psychedelic therapy, and I'd like to learn more about ketamine. So what is it about ketamine that helps us understand more about ourselves and the problems that we're facing? Yeah, sure.
It's all, to answer your psilocybin versus ketamine question, it's all in the same spectrum. I'm in training to use MDMA when it's legal, probably next year, and in trainings with people are generating these spaces for psilocybin. I look forward to soon offering all three and other modalities. This one is unique because it's short and it creates a lot of introspection. The other ones do as well, but if you really break down the nuances of what psilocybin does, it creates a lot of possibilities in mind. MDMA is really a entheogen, it's a empathogen too. It makes you love and it disarms triggered responses. So effective at PTSD and veteran traumas. Ketamine, it can do all those things too. It has all those components, but what the beauty of it is as a therapeutic model is shorter acting. So in 40 minutes, you're in and out. So in a 2-hour session, you can create a lasting change. But what it does is it evokes this huge disruption from your cortex, your brain, and your subconscious. Actually, and before we go down the road, let me do a little bit of background. If you, the way that our mind has evolved from, amphibians to humans, I'll do in a quick 3 steps. First, we're these animals that just had a nervous system. We could breathe. We had a heartbeat. There's nothing we could do about it. Mammals became much more complex animals that could react to their environment. They felt the senses, and they had immediate reaction to things around them. But they didn't project, they didn't think about it. You could see in your National Geographic video, the gazelles running from the lion, and then they stop like a quarter mile away, and you're like, what are you doing, guys? Keep running. The guy's gonna come get you. And you're like, dude, this could happen in a second. They're not anxious. What the cortex, the human brain, is something that kept developing over that. And it's a linear progression. It's not like this grew here and this grew here. It's a part of the same animal. The human cortex allows us to project thoughts. It allows us to come up with a weekend, come up with this beautiful plan, and then get a phone call and have it all canceled, and then get depressed and anxious and disappointed. There was no weekend plans. That was never happening. That was a projection of your mind. You wanted something that didn't even exist. And thinking of that and being disappointed by it, being anxious and worrying about the girl that was going to show up there or not, is taking away from your presence. You can only be present. As a mammal, you're here right now. You can only be in one place at one time. And you can sense that. You can be with your offspring and your siblings and your community, that the gazelles are all serving each other. They all have a purpose. They're not worried. The human brain creates worry, anxiety. It creates beautiful things. You got this. You make a podcast and plan next week, and you can plan for a 4th of July party right now because we have the capacity. But it also creates anxiety, depression, and all the things that an overworking brain causes. So what ketamine does, and what it is an dissociative anesthetic. So I've used it hundreds, maybe 1,000 times in the past 10 years in the ER. And what I use it for is to dissociate the body from the mind, so I could use it as an anesthetic. I use it with kids all the time. It's so safe. I can give it an IM injection and sew up their face for 45 minutes. They don't even know I'm there. If a dog bit them, or put someone's shoulder back in, and really use it as an anesthetic. But at 1/4 of the doses I'd use in the hospital, it still dissociates your mind from your cortex, from your subconscious. So what it allows you to do is take that part of your brain that's trying to intellectualize the solution to everything offline, put you into your subconscious, and just see it for a minute, and just be like, oh my God, this is what life's like if I'm not worried about my weight. This is what life's like if I don't care what Joe thinks of my sweater. This is what life's like if I stop mourning the death of someone that's been a heavy jacket for a decade. And they break through, and it creates a reference point. It says, this is what happiness can be for you. And then slowly you come back online. And with appropriate therapy, coaching, integration, we say, did you see what happened there? How did that serve you? What did you see there? Can that be something you carry with you tomorrow, next month, for the week? And then let's do it again next week. And then we do this. I typically try to get people in for a 6-week commitment, therapy before, sometimes definitely after, every time before. And we just keep disrupting this model, evoking this huge crisis, evoking this disruption of your mind from your body. And we have that sometimes. If someone calls you and said your mom's in a car accident, she's in the hospital, you just drop everything and run and go there. You forget about everything. So we try to evoke this process and get someone to become really centered. I tell people during the sessions, go back in your heart, be with yourself. And then they can take a moment to, I guess, be in this ideal form. Most people find it calm and relaxing. Some people, it's troublesome. You don't always get the trip that you want. You get the trip that you need. Sometimes they're fighting it. They're just seeing it. But when they come out, after a few sessions, we understand it. And that dissociative component of it is why it's so healing. But it's different than, go on. Yeah, I can go forever.
It kind of seems like as human beings, our biggest strength is also one of our biggest enemies. So evolutionarily, we were able to take over the planet, but we are so weak physically compared to like any animal, like a house cat, a medium-sized house cat, if it went ape shit, could like hurt you. Versus like a person that size, you just be like goodbye, snap, And so like in like, if you think like going back in time in hand-to-hand combat against like predators, we would never stand a chance except for our ability to imagine things and come up with plans and like convince people of things that hadn't happened yet. And so it's almost like that biggest strength that we have is one of our biggest enemies, because it also comes with all the other side of like worrying about things that don't matter, anxiety, all of that stuff. And so ketamine assisted therapy is kind of a way to like completely dissociate you from that sort of thing, like in an instant. And then as you come back into reality, you're kind of like putting the pieces back together, which may have been kind of like scrambled from your own way of thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious because
That's so wild.
I'm aware, like obviously the dosages used in ketamine assisted therapy versus like your medical practice in the hospital would be very different. What kind of doses are used in ketamine assisted therapy, and like what are they like for the listeners? Because with those familiar with psychedelics, like we have the 5 stages. You like the stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 5 being like the hero's journey, where that really profound like ego death and whatnot comes from. But what kind of doses do you use in ketamine assisted therapy? What's that like?
Yeah, good question. There's also the modalities. So there's 3 ways of offering it. There's some form of oral lozenges, something that dissolves in your mouth, and there's IV, an infusion, and then there's intramuscular injection. So intramuscular and IV are like 98% bioavailability within like, so almost all the medicine gets into your bloodstream. Orally, it's like 12 to 16% of the medicines that gets in your mouth, and if you swallow it, it's only like 5%. So if you've got to swallow, 20 times as much as you get IV. And then the curve is different. Orally it's like a nice gradual, and you'll never hit the same peaks. And then IV goes way faster, and IM goes the same. So I'll just talk about the IM. I like IM. The truth is, if you get an IV and a nurse is sitting in there in the room with you, it feels like a medical model. This, like just like everything else, it's about set and setting. The theory in some degree was like, that'll help facilitate your trip. I think that set and setting is your trip. And I don't use the word trip for any of my patients, but under the circumstances, I know you guys are coming from that. Your therapy is molded. It is 100% a lens. It creates a lens into your mindset at that time. And the setting is so important because I have to gain trust. The people have to trust us. They have to trust me. I tell them, I've done this 100 times. Your body is safe. Nothing you do, no sounds you make will ever be something I've never heard before. So let it go. So that is part of not starting an IV and having a random nurse in here. And one thing I didn't like about the Western model of medicine is I could be behind there and have a great patient interaction and write the orders, and a nurse goes in there that like, I love my nurses, but could be had a bad day, and the therapist might be disgruntled. Something happens, and I'm like, you don't have the full high touch experience. I'm injecting the medicine. I'm there. We're holding hands, touching. We're creating the contact. So IM is the way I give it. But I'm not answering your question. 1 milligram per kilogram is a great starting dose. And we really top out at 2 milligrams per kilogram. And 2 is a lot. To be honest, I haven't given anyone.
That's a lot.
But 1 to 1.5 is the therapeutic range. And someone that is ready, I will start them at 1. And I let them know at 1, you're going to have a dense trance-like state. You'll have, you'll feel untriggered. You'll feel disarmed. Most people float. There's always this river sensation. The playlist is very important. Maps help curate a really effective playlist for the arc of the journey. And it's really amazing after you do this file, there is an arc. It's a 40-minute arc that the beginning has a steep slope up really fast. And then you kind of have this plateau. And then as you descend, there's a different tempo you'd want. You'd want a different vibe for entering, and you want a different vibe for the float and a different vibe for the backside. And it's like your guide, so the music guides you through it, and the doses will determine how high you get up. So starting at 1 milligram per kilogram, that's where you get. At like 2.5 to 0.3, people start having this strong, profound ego disillusion, which is common. But I think what's unique to ketamine is you have a real dense loss of identity. You have a question of whether you even knew who you are. You start to disintegrate as far as ever being connected to your body. And at their higher doses, this scares people, but you have this near-death experience. And some of the ketamine papers that I first read that attracted me to ketamine in general had some good reports on this. And it's really interesting to experience your death, and then to experience your life cycle, and then to experience re-entry into humanity in a 40-minute experience. And when you do, man, you re-enter in a place ready to make changes. And I love when my patients are in the right mindset to enter that kind of feeling, but not everyone is. I'd say you'd have to do a lot of preparation to get to that point, even if you took 0.6 or 2 milligrams. So it's not purely dose dependent. Doses will help guide you, but where you are is where the medicine will meet you. And some people can't fully let go of that, but that's the potential of it.
You know what this?
I could imagine that. And that death sounds like it sounds like the hero's journey. It is like the death of yourself and a rebirth. And yeah, that will change you. But if you're not ready for it, it could be catastrophic. It could be really bad.
Yeah, you would want to go right into it, but it's that's why we always advocate for several journeys, and we start slow and work our way into it. And everyone kind of declares what they're ready for. And I know we don't try to move too quickly.
Of course.
And this isn't mine. I think I learned this from Synthesis, a really great group in the Netherlands. It's 80% of it's the container, and only 20% is the medicine. So how you show up, and how thick your walls are, and how tall how much volume you could hold. You are the container, and the medicine goes in it, and that's the growth happens inside the container.
I love that.
Yeah, this kind of reminds me of like going on a really long, really good vacation. Maybe you've been like working every day for years straight, and you like, everything is very like high strung, and then you just quit your job and you go like travel the world for 6 months, and then you have like no responsibilities. You have like a totally you come back like refreshed with a totally refocused look, like ready to get back into society. It kind of reminds me of like that type of experience, but like bottled into, like you said, a 40-minute session. Sounds awesome.
Yeah. Super effective.
Yeah.
Super efficient.
Way more efficient.
We're about efficiency here.
Yeah.
That's what we want.
You don't have to like fly to Jamaica or go on ayahuasca like weekend.
Exactly. Yeah.
I would love that. I mean, I would love that too. but it seems like, in addition to there being a need for alternative forms of medicine, there's also a desire for people to like want it to be more effective and efficient. So you could go to therapy for 10 years, or you could do 6 weeks of ketamine therapy, right? Like, is there any data to show like how much faster and more effective it really is?
Kind of. What you just said, it sounds like cliche. Like I hear someone's like, that was more effective than 6 years of working with my favorite therapist, and I'm like, I feel like a plaque on the wall, and we like point to that, and like that's what they like. What the answer is? There's information and there's studies and there's people reporting that, but how do you objectively collect for that? What's the placebo trial for 7 years of therapy versus experience in the afternoon? So this, there's a lot of data out there, and I just got off the phone with someone that says, well, I did 30 hours of research, everything's IV and this is better and this is better. I'm like, you're looking at the medical stuff that got published. I see the effects. It should be IM. You need intentional therapy, and you have to be ready for it. Like, don't worry about the other stuff. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and it kind of loops back to one of the original things you said, which is like, when you're dealing with the brain, it's not quite as simple as like something's broken. Here's the fix for it. It's like. It seems like it's like infinitely more complex than that. So, people are always going to want to be like, well, how much more effective is it than regular therapy? But it's like, how do you even start to present that?
Yeah. And in a single moment, all 6 weeks of value, 6 years of value, whatever the price is, and the price isn't money per se. I mean, the most valuable resources are time. So you should be somewhere else doing something that's healthy. But all the value can be given to you in a moment's time when you come out of the journey and someone says something and bang, you get it. You've just taken everything you've been looking at and reoriented it 5 degrees. And your house, your mom and your wife and everyone's the same, but now you see it and it makes more sense. And I could intellectualize 1,000 logistical reasons why I should stop drinking coffee or alcohol or something more functional, like just be more around with your kids or something. But you can't explain how to embody that. You can't teach that. But if you come out of this process and you've done the work and someone helps you and all of a sudden you embody it, and now you don't think, there's no other way of thinking about it. You're like, I only believe in this now. Mm-hmm. That you can't put a price on that, and you can't talk your way around that. If talk therapy didn't work for 2 years, it's not going to work for 6 years. Mm-hmm. But yeah, try something new.
Yeah, and I think kind of like Travis said, and what you've elaborated on, Raymie, is like this isn't just about chemical imbalances. Yes, they may exist. Mental health is about thought processes. It's about frameworks that you've learned from a young age. And if they're unhealthy or unproductive or counterproductive frameworks that lead you down a path of a negative mindset, negative thinking, anxiety, depression, worry, then changing the chemical imbalance isn't always the solution. Like, we need to fix the root cause, and that's your thought patterns. That's your processes. That's the frameworks that you've learned. So like you said, if you can go down this journey and in a moment's time come to a realization that changes your ability to think effectively and productively, change your thought process, then you're going to have sustainable change. And like you said, it might not last forever, but maybe it lasts a week, maybe it lasts a month, maybe it lasts 2 months. And every time you do it, maybe it lasts a little bit longer. That, if that doesn't make sense, that is what creates sustainable change, then I don't know what does, but it makes perfect sense to me. Yeah. So I love the concept, and I love, like, obviously it works. We're aware of that. And it really does hit home to like the power of positive thinking, changing thought patterns, breaking old frameworks, developing new ones and whatnot. But I'm curious to know about like the practice itself. What are like the laws around ketamine? What was it like to start your practice? Were there a ton of hoops to jump through? I'd like to learn more about the business side of this too.
Yeah, that's, that was intimidating for me as well, coming from a like academic and off of PCP in the 60s, and they found that the profile that was so safe that the Vietnam War, like the heat of the Vietnam War in the 70s, they rolled it out as a buddy drug. So they gave it to people to inject their friends when they got injured, because their blood pressure and their their cardiovascular, their respiratory status would be intact. So this medicine has been in heavy use in the 70s. So it's not a new medicine. It's highly, it's generic and has been for a long time. And so getting access to it was easy. I've used it for a long time, and basically all I have to do is, go through a little bit of paperwork, and I can get it for use. It's Schedule 3, which means in reference, I'll say Schedule 1 drugs are like, cocaine, where there's no medical use for it and it's highly addictive. Schedule 3 means there's some addictive properties and there are definite medical uses, but because it has some addictive properties, it's controlled. But Schedule 3 means I don't need like a safe and like a camera on it in my office. I can keep it in a safe, but getting the medicine and applying for a license was the same as opening any general practice office. Ultimately, what the thing that mattered to me is that I had to make sure that the practice aligned with my my purpose, and so I had to make sure that I had the proper training and the proper therapists around me. So when I did trainings out here in Topanga in LA, I met several therapists there that were informed in non-ordinary states of consciousness and had guided used other plant medicine to guide people and had been trained in ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. So the biggest thing for me was to make sure I wasn't giving the medicine to people and sending them to traditional talk medicine therapists. I think ketamine and this space in general is wasted on the wrong, if not the right modalities aren't utilized. So I have a team of like 8 therapists now that I know I trust and will be able to hold space correctly for the people I give this to. So for me, the getting the medicine and getting the office was one step, but really to create the whole experience is the part that I'm still doing, and that was building this team. So I have a great team now, and everyone I meet, I make a personality match. I go, oh, you should meet this therapist, or you should meet this one, and once we connect them, then we create the team, and then we can we work together, we share notes, and we make sure that people are getting what they need, and that's my growing edge, really.
I think that's really important, especially when you talk about like the set and the setting. As like you're going to go down this journey, you're probably going to do and think and see some weird shit. And if you're not comfortable sharing those things with people, I think that's part of why a lot of traditional therapy doesn't work for a lot of people, is like there's not a level of trust and that allows for us to like tell things that we've never told anybody before in our lives and work through shit that like we're extremely self-conscious of or like upset by. And so it's cool to hear that there's a process for like essentially just almost matchmaking like a client to a therapist as to how they're going to fit, who they're going to interact best with. So yeah, I imagine the people was kind of the hardest part. Like everything else seems like it was pretty standard procedure, but the people are really what make it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that's probably a lot of businesses, but this is not like
of course.
I have to find people that can hold space in non-ordinary states of consciousness. Like I don't know. Yeah. That resonates with you.
Yeah. Oh, it does. I mean, you're a Burning Man guy. You go to Burning Man, it's like you find your people. Everyone's kind of in like a weird state, but you find your people, and there's people that you connect to, and you instantly feel at home with, and it's very interesting, and it's nice to find those people. It's also nice to be that person for someone. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that is really important, especially in those altered states. Can be a little bit challenging, but man, I'm just fascinated by this stuff. And I know, Travis, we have a bunch of listener questions.
Yeah.
I think a lot of them are probably, we may have answered at least a few of them is what I'm seeing, but do you think it's an appropriate time to kind of get into those?
Yeah, let's get into a couple of these at least.
Let's do it.
So the first one that I'm also super interested in is a question from somebody who's in the Army, and they're asking about, is ketamine being used to help vets, especially with PTSD, and kind of what's the focus around that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I think I won't go into details, but there's 4 primary indications for using ketamine, and one of them is PTSD. And it's because that's separation. Because if we can take the trauma offline for a minute, and you can be with yourself without that trauma, just with you every morning, every afternoon, every night, just being alone in your own mind, it'll help you understand that that's a reference point that maybe you can access on a regular basis. And really, everything that we treat is this. The goal is always to treat the root cause, whether it's addiction or trauma, OCD, and so. But PTSD is definitely something that needs a strong disruption to see what life's like without PTSD, and I think it's really good at doing that.
Yeah, that's
I'm curious.
Oh, go ahead.
I was curious just to ask what the other 3 were. The other 3 indicators of utilizing ketamine.
Mostly, there's like minor criteria, but mostly treatment-resistant depression, PTSD, and then anxiety that disrupts your life when meeting certain criteria. But to be like above board, that's the beauty of actually. This is legal. We're entering a place that typically you have to enter remand for legally, and that's changing. The world's changing quickly, but it has to meet criteria for those things, and our clients do.
Do you think that'll keep getting utilized for a lot of these like mental health issues that a lot of service members are having when they come back here? Do you think I guess psychedelic assisted therapy, because maybe it's ketamine, maybe it's MDMA, maybe it's psilocybin, like those seem to be the 3 main ones. Do you think that that's going to have like a big place in kind of treating people as we go forward?
Yeah, definitely. In so many modalities, and access is difficult, because it's expensive. Just paying for a therapist is expensive, much like all these other things. But new modalities will come out, groups. I'm actually helping run a trial right now where we're using microdoses of ketamine with people that are already on SSRIs to see if they can get off the SSRIs. So we're looking at like microdosing, which would be easier to gain people access because you don't. Because then you can do group integrations and it'll lower the costs of access. So I say that because vets, are typically people with PTSD in general are less likely to go out and reach out for help. So if you can lower the cost and just make it less friction to get access, then it could become like mainstream, really.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And was that kind of one of the factors that really interested you, and I'm sure others, in starting with ketamine assisted therapy, in that it's already legal, we're allowed to do it, and eventually we're going to be introduced and have access to other modalities like MDMA, psilocybin, and other drugs that we find are helpful once they become legalized?
Yeah, my interest was principally psilocybin. And I just took a 6-month sabbatical, and I think Travis, you mentioned, it's this beautiful time where I did some introspection on RV and road tripped with the kids around the country, and I was in Yellowstone.
That's cool.
Reading ketamine papers because in a podcast I heard someone mention, "Oh, you got to read this book," and ketamine's highly stigmatized, and it's because it's a drug of a party drug, and so I carried that stigma with me. I had that bias. I'm like, I use ketamine all the time. Why would I? No, that's not the agent for me. But I read this book, and I read things so well presented that this is the real deal. This causes real transpersonal dissociative experiences and articulated by a scientist such that it resonated with what I heard in the course I took in Johns Hopkins. And I go, I can do this now. And if it doesn't align with my purpose, or it doesn't align with my practice, I can stop. But if it does, I'll be that much more ready for when MDMA rolls out and when psilocybin rolls out. And God, there's nothing better than to know that there are so many 60-year-olds that lived in a time where drugs were so heavily stigmatized, and I can offer them this non-ordinary state of consciousness where they could resolve this trauma that they've been carrying their whole life, or help them deal with grief that nothing else worked. and they can have a real transformative experience that they wouldn't do because everything's illegal and scary, but will now because a doctor that they could trust in a sterile setting can offer this to them. So I saw this as actionable, do it now, and it was kind of serendipitous the way I came across the book, and it felt right. And is so the answer is I'm in ketamine therapy because it's allowable and I have a license to protect, and but it's great. It's really effective, and in 5 years forward, fast forward 5 years, if everything is legal, I'll still be using this. It'll be kind of a la carte, like, this there'll be agent that might be better for you and another one for someone else. It's not inferior to these other modalities.
So what you're saying is ketamine is a gateway drug.
For me.
Yeah.
The gateway practice.
It's the gateway practice drug.
Yeah.
I think that's something like, the people, our parents' generation, we were raised that drugs are bad, stay away from drugs, and not about the fact that they're just tools. Like everything we have is just a tool, and it can be used for better or worse. And there are certain applications that it works really well in, and certain applications that it doesn't. But I think once people start to understand that, like, everything that we're given, everything that's presented to us, it has a purpose. If it's used properly, then it can really help people. It can also hurt people if it's used improperly. But that's why we have people like you, is to help us ensure that these tools are used properly, safely, and effectively. And once we have access to other modalities, I think younger generations have already started experimenting with things like this a lot. They've been experimenting with psilocybin and using it as a tool and not a party drug. And it seems as though that's kind of the way the world is heading, is they're understanding that, it's not just to get fucked up, for lack of a better term. It's powerful. It's useful. So it's cool. It's promising to hear you say that, like, MDMA is in the future as well, because that's another very powerful tool. I'm excited about that.
Have you guys read the book Drug Use for Grown-Ups by Dr. Carl Hart?
No, I want to read that though. This is the professor, right?
Yeah. He's a professor and like a, I don't know, doctor that's been, he started his career by working for like anti-drug stuff. And the reason he got into his career was because like when he learned like the anti-drug protocol, and he was doing studies to find out things about drugs to like make them illegal, and then just kept finding that they like shouldn't be, basically. And then he uses like different drugs himself. And it was just, I don't know. I was just wondering what your thoughts on it, where it's an interesting book.
Yeah. I know him. I've kind of been in this space. As soon as I started to go in this practice, I've had to read much denser things to help my patients and reading the literature. But it's on my list. I've heard it. I saw it come through my feed a couple times. But it's. I had a patient the other day that kept, every time the back end, she's like, "Why? This is bad. I'm doing drugs."
Mm-hmm.
And in one of my courses, someone asked a really great question. They go, I've been using this medicine like several times a month, and when is using drugs too much drugs? She said it, and the person who answered it was a really powerfully, her presence, her high vibration individual. These people, like when you're burners, or like people that they fill the room, they have a little bit, whatever they're putting down, you want to pick it up. And she says, you have to have a reverence for each experience. You have to have intentionality. If you prepare mentally, you allocate time, you're going to create proper integration, and you go into this space as a journey, as a healing experience. I don't give anyone drugs. I give them a medicine, and we are healing together. And it happens to be a psychedelic. And so this healing ceremony, if you want to use that word, or this healing practice, can be used weekly or as often as it needs to, as long as you create the space for it, and you're integrating it after. And then these grown-ups can heal all they want. But if it's Friday and it just pops up out of nowhere, and you're also drinking, and that's then you're abusing it. And that's true of anything.
Yeah.
Cannabis, alcohol, carbohydrates. Like I'll just get a donut. Like that's carb abuse.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say, like, a lot of us have been using or even abusing drugs every single day since we were like 13 or 14 years old, in caffeine, and like take like a couple grams of caffeine and tell me that that's like a harmless substance. You know what I mean? Like it can totally
your last cup.
Yeah, that'll be your last. That'll be your last headache. So, it's kind of interesting. It's like who determines what's a drug and what's just like a thing that, you can, if you drank like 4 Bang Energies, which would be like, no one's carding you at the store telling you to not do that. That's like, how much damage did you just do to your heart in, a couple hours? So, yeah. And that's kind of, go ahead.
That I've probably admitted 10 young adults from pre-workout related injuries, rhabdo, small heart attacks, actually, but those things, but like real profound experiences. And like, I started asking that, I like look at them, I'm like, if you look like Josh, I'm just going to ask, do you pre-workout? And I don't like anticipate what all the mistakes they could be making. And like my discharge instructions are like, don't take pre-workout ever again. Whatever's in there is not good for you. It is for sure hurting your body. And it's probably just hasn't made it on the radar of the FDA.
That's honestly something that concerns me because when I was younger, I drank so much pre-workout. I would drink pre-workout like before I went and played football games. It's like that's such a bad mistake. My mom always said, "Don't do that," and I was like, whatever. And now I'm like, fuck. I don't know why.
And that was in the Jack 3D days.
Yeah,
that was back in the Jack 3D days when they were using methyl diet, however you say it. And yeah, everyone's trying to make pre-workouts that are like really powerful that you feel. And then you feel them and you're like, oh shit, I think I'm having a heart attack. Not ideal. So yeah, application and intent. Like what's the purpose? The purpose of a pre-workout, for example, should be to enhance performance, to help, like clear lactate from your system, to have like actual functional application, not just make you feel like you want to run through a brick wall. And I think the same holds true for any of these other drugs. It's like, what's the intention behind you using this drug? Are you just trying to party and get fucked up? Are you just taking it because like whatever, you're already having fun and why not add to it? Or are you trying to work through something? Are you trying to learn something about yourself? Are you trying to answer a question? Are you trying to get closer to somebody? There has to be intent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. We do have a couple other questions, and this one I'm actually really curious about as well. This comes from my girlfriend, Alexa, who is curious to know, when ketamine therapy was introduced to the medical world, were there hypotheses to a specific patient profile that it may treat, like specifically PTSD, specifically depression or anxiety? Or was it kind of just like an experimental blanket treatment that they used for a number of ailments to see what it worked best with?
Good question. I'll confess that I don't know the details of the history. I've read I think the best books outlining it, but I haven't dug deeper. The earliest stuff came out like in the 70s, but the papers that I would say that were unique were in the 80s, and the ones where I'd say where I started taking notes were in the 90s. Klopp, I think, Eli Klopp, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, produced a really good research in Russia looking at addiction. And I remember reading that chapter in Yellowstone and being like, this is profound, where he created a real intentional 1 or 2 week retreat for people that were using alcohol, that were going for alcohol rehab. And alcohol rehab, like effectiveness, remittance, it's like 13%. I don't want to quote that as science, but it's very low. And I'm sorry if someone's listening to this and they know the number is higher or lower. But he was getting something in the order of like 70 or 80%, or let's say a 70% just adding ketamine. And then he created a really good program, creating intentionality, having people meditate daily and think about their vibration in the universe, and then journaling, and then changing their diet to a lower detox. And then, and this is something I tell every one of my clients, this is part of my program, kind of based on his addiction medicine, and detoxifying, and looking at the agents that you add to your body that dull your senses and the ones that inflate your ego. caffeine, 5-hour energy. These things inflate your ego. They make your human brain so active that you can't be in your subconscious. And the sedatives deflate everything so that your subconscious doesn't make sounds, so that you can't be yourself. So this asks you to do several steps to really, really, really be conscious, so that when you take a journey, a round trip ticket into your subconscious, when you're down there, and the return, when you get back home, hopefully some of your baggage gets stuck in baggage claims, and you don't have around. You just leave it there and on. And so went from, let's say, 15% effectiveness to 70% effectiveness, and then with a program, you got to 88% effectiveness. Even looking at 1 and 5 years out, I don't know 5 years, but it's definitely 1 year out for alcohol. Interest in alcohol treatment. So that answers the question in one regard.
Yeah.
The newer stuff that I've looked at in 2005, I read a study recently, and this is when they started really looking at treatment-resistant depression. And I'll admit that I don't know enough about the literature to say all the population were looked at, but addiction was really closely looked at early on, and then they looked at treatment-resistant depression, and then other things have been rolled out.
It's really interesting. And it all works pretty much the same way, by dissociating, entering into the subconscious, learning more about exactly what's happening down there, why you feel the need to either think a certain way, desire a certain thing, overcome that, have peace with it.
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah.
The root cause. Why are you sedating the hell out of your mind every day? What unresolved traumas are you carrying? What grief do you have daily? Why are you so mind?
Okay, so I have another question now. So this past year for me has been arguably easily one of the most transformative years of my life, and definitely the most transformative year when it comes to the work that I've been able to do in therapy. And I think a lot of people, when they start having success on these journeys, it's like you start learning about yourself, you face some of your demons, you start to dig and you start fixing things. And the deeper you dig, the more you find. And that can be really overwhelming, even on a long duration, like a long period of time. Do you find that because you're shortening that window and you're getting a lot more done in a smaller time frame, that people at all ever get overwhelmed with the amount of work that they have to do?
I think most people show up overwhelmed to some degree. They don't turn to a brand new modality because everything's been okay all month. So this is an extension, and typically this new orientation, this new tool they have, not the treatment itself, but when they leave here, this idea of God, I should try this. God, what if this were my life? Or that typically makes it less overwhelming. And then if it's too much, I tell them to pause and then open it up during therapy again. It's surprisingly no. So the answer has been, for me, surprisingly no. But Josh, it sounds like you might not have one of the classic indications for it. If you fell in the category of worried well at all, then you're really chipping away at the bottom of the part of your soul that's problematic. You may have already had a lot of it under control, and now you open it and you're like, oh, you're really in the details. So that's and that's why the therapist is with you. You get to stay with them and keep doing the work, and you could always come back to the journeys and do a little bit of the work on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's valid. That's very valid. Now, I think the most important question, I'm looking to make sure if we did touch on all of them. I think a lot of them were answered previously in our conversation. But the most important question that I think everyone's wondering is, where can you get ketamine assisted therapy? Is it all 50 states? Is it only certain states? Where can we go?
I don't know. As far as I think it's. I don't think there's anywhere you can't.
Okay.
Drug's been, on the World Health Organization top 50 medicines that helped society for like 20 years. So ketamine is accessible in every state. What you need to do is find, an informed team. And you'll find clinics all over the place, infusion centers, place where you can show up, get an infusion, and then go home. That doesn't have zero value, but that has less lasting value in my perspective. And we could have this conversation for a long time. Where I would start is maybe, like, a lot of people could find me locally, but a lot of people that will ask me in Idaho, what do I do next? How do I get involved in this? Is I would steer them to like a place like psychedelicsupport.com or Healing Maps and find a therapist. And then even like I'm working with some people that are like, I really want to work with you. What's next? I go, find a therapist in your area. I'll connect with them. If they seem like they can do work, we even do a remote session where you can get lozenges. And they get them to your house, and with the right therapy in person, that can happen in a dyadic group. I just did one the other day where a therapist from San Francisco that has someone that lives here because of remote living or working. She now is back in Santa Barbara home, and she was in a Zoom meeting. So the comfortable therapist that she really trusts is here. Me, that she trusts, but only is known for a few days, is here. And it's like a 3-person, or a dyad, 2 healers and 1 person in the space. So if you can find the team, you can have it anywhere in the world. But I don't strongly recommend doing these remote sessions. So if you go find a therapist in your area that would sit with you, and then you can connect with anyone that would prescribe the medicine. But you want the whole program. Like, I've designed a program that I really feel strongly about. But start with those 2 resources and see if you can find local people. You could hit me up. I'm Santa Barbara, ketamine.com. And I'm on all these other resources. But if you find someone locally, and then they may know someone that can prescribe with them, and then they could do home journeys. And then to get intermuscular, obviously they have to be in someone's office. So once you start asking you meet the right people that can try to connect you, they can offer, connections and places where you can go.
Mm-hmm. That's valuable. That's perfect, because I've been interested for a long time. And I know people listening to this episode are probably going to be interested in it as well. So I appreciate allowing our listeners to reach out to you. I think, Travis, did you mention that you had someone local here in Denver, in Colorado?
Yeah, I did some video marketing work for Clary Sauna Clinic. There's like 4 locations, or maybe even 7 locations in Colorado. But I don't know them well enough to say like they have a really good team and they do the full therapy side of it, but they are definitely like one of the bigger ones around here. They have a bunch of locations in Colorado, so that's definitely, if you're a local Colorado person and you want to look into this, I would suggest at least contacting them. And then if you're in California, definitely go to Raymie, because he's definitely doing it the right way.
Yeah, I'm thinking like we have some friends in LA, and next time we go,
I might come visit you.
Come visit you.
I do. You guys should come back. I do every other month. I'm doing group therapy in this beautiful space in LA. So my next group is in March 12th. We have this amazing. We do the integration online in a group of 6 people, and then we do it in the space, and we do the integration afterward. The group healing space is powerful. People, like us guys, it's hard to kind of even open up in a group. But once someone next to you says something really vulnerable, you want to one up them. You're like, oh yeah, well, I feel this one. Really open more than they ever have in the public space. Or not totally private space, and then and it's fun. It's like we do this 4-hour program, and it's cool. And then afterward, it's kind of like that you can further get your own help later, or come back to them every other month, and then you can continue to integrate and do your work. There's a few different ways of getting care, but yeah, you can start asking questions. I think psychedelic support is the best place I'd connect with.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. And then you also mentioned Healing Maps. Is that by any chance where we could get access to that playlist that you mentioned?
No. Heal Maps is
Okay.
kind of, it's like with like the cannabis version where it's kind of like it just kind of shows you where you can get access. No, the playlist. Ooh, I can share it. I'll send you guys. I'll give you something you put in your show notes.
Okay.
Oh, that would be awesome.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah, because
Like a duplicate.
Nice.
I missed that. What?
Oh, it's like I could give you like a Spotify playlist
Oh.
that kind of created some of the original stuff.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'd be great.
You said that. I was instantly interested.
Yeah, you don't want verbal. You don't want voices. You don't want you want it to be pretty you want it to be response specific, like high vibration, but no identity. You don't want to face a voice. Like you don't want to think. You want it to be a blank slate, but with a lot of potential energy.
I love that.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this, man. This has been an absolutely fascinating conversation. I've really enjoyed this, and I appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge and telling us a little bit more about what ketamine-assisted therapy is, why it works so well. I'm very interested in it. I'm really interested to try it. I have a lot of friends who talk about it and who have done it, and I want to be able to give our listeners a little the resources that you provided, which I think are really valuable, but I also want to give them a chance to like find you and learn more about you. So why don't you just give yourself a little bit of a plug and tell people where they can find you and where you're located online and different resources that you have. And I think that would be helpful.
Sure. Yeah. So I just kind of launched my digital presence, so it's really minimal. But if you go to SantaBarbaraKetamine.com, then on the bottom you can find my 3 links: my LinkedIn and my Instagram. I think I'll probably be most active on Instagram, just talking. I just talked to someone who want to do a big. There's like a 1,200 room place where I'm going to do a lecture for the Santa Barbara community about psychedelics in general. But my Instagram is sb.k.amine. So you can't write ketamine on Instagram, and it's
Really?
stigmatized. You can't put it anywhere there. There's cannabis got all shut down too. So SB ketamine, but there's a dot between the B and the K. That's the best way. You can if you find me on my website and you send me a note or send me an email or Raymie at @sandbarketamine, then I can always help people connect to their local place, their local environment. It's unfortunately, it's a high touch service. So I just launched and I'm booking out to March, and it's really nice to make these immediate contacts. But I also don't like that there's a lot of people that it'll be harder to access, and I'm thinking about what that means for me in the future. But sometimes I can help connect people to their local resources.
That's awesome. And I know it will be greatly appreciated, myself included. We can find someone here in Colorado. But man, Raymie, thank you for coming on. Thank you for agreeing to this. I'm glad that our dad introduced us. And when Trav and I come out to LA, we'll get the whole crew into a group and we'll do a full group setting. There's probably 17 of us. But I think that would be a great time. But yeah, thank you, man. I really appreciate you coming on. This has been really great.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for asking great questions. It's really nice to have this platform. This is there's a huge appetite for good information about psychedelics, and I can give you my information.
100%.
Yeah, I appreciate it. We just want to be able to provide that good information and kind of break the stigma. So it's been really appreciated. So thank you again for coming on, and thank you to everyone who's tuned in to another episode of the Struggle to Strength podcast. We'll see y'all next week.